So this is a graph that shows you the consumption of grains per capita. So on the left side there, you can see the pounds per capita year, and then the year at the bottom there. So we have, well, we're going to look at rice, total flour, and cereal products. So those are together. Corn products and then wheat products. And you're going to say, well, flour and wheat, aren't those the same thing? Actually, they're not. White flour and wheat flour are two different things, made from the same plant, but definitely two different things. So you can see there that flour and cereal products have been the #1 spot there. So anything that's preserved or processed as far as breakfast foods or cereal probably will forever be, I think in our generation, at the top there. Rice probably will be the lowest amount there, just because we can grow rice in America, but we can't grow it on the large scale that we can wheat. And so that's been pretty interesting. You can see there that there was a little bit of an incline in wheat flour in the 1990s and early 2000s, just because there was a lot of big push for people to eat whole wheat flour, whole wheat bread. And so that's always been kind of, if there's going to be any competition with white flour, it's definitely going to be wheat flour. And then corn products, kind of the same, just down there with the rice. We can grow a lot of corn, but there's not a lot of processed foods we can make with different varieties of fuel corn. And I want you to think of like heavy cream, sour cream, any sort of canola oil, heavy cream. Those are lipids. And so fats, they're considered saturated lipids that we use from animal sources, and they are solid at room temperature. Okay, so that's different from oils, because we get those lipids from plant sources, and we store them at room temperature too. So lipids like lard obviously is going to be a solid when it's at room temperature, but when you're cooking with it, it's going to turn into a liquid. When you are cooking with heavy cream, it's going to kind of disintegrate into that meal. And then kind of the same thing with butter, corn oil, canola oil, all of that. One staggering statistic that is pretty interesting to talk about is how much we consume of lipids, and it's about 80 pounds per year of added lipids. So lipids that are not only just in our foods that we're eating. So, but hey, who doesn't like to cook with butter? Who doesn't like to cook with heavy cream? So just that gives you that added flavor. But we consume about 80 pounds more of added lipids per year. Cooking oil, and you can see that salads and cooking oil have definitely really taken off since the early 2000s. Butter kind of always going to be kind of stagnant at the bottom there, just because we have really two types of butter. We have salted and unsalted, and it's not really cooked with a lot anymore. Margarine was pretty big in the 70s and 80s, but then started to kind of go downhill when we started to use a little bit more shortening, and then were able to buy cooking oil for a lot cheaper than we could butter. Okay, so sweeteners. Crazy when you think about sweeteners, because we eat about 140 pounds per capita of sweeteners. So what does that mean? That means just different things that are added to processed food. So the most common one that we see is high fructose corn syrup and table sugar. So table sugar, obviously, and high fructose corn syrup, that is derived from sugar beets and from sugar cane. Okay, so it is added to different products to make that sweet flavor, and it's really cheap to make. So a lot of manufacturers, when you look at food products, are going to use those to sweeten food. Now, high fructose corn syrup, sugar's kind of always had a bad name, because you shouldn't have so much sugar, and it can cause a lot of different problems in your body. But high fructose corn syrup has really gotten a bad name. And so what are people doing? They're taking that out. They might be adding another type of sweetener that's not as bad for your body, and they're putting that on the label, so you will see that it doesn't have high fructose corn syrup. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in class this week. Sweetener were just different sweeteners that are added to different foods, whether that is like a fruit punch, whether that's a Kool-Aid, whether that's a cookie like Chips Ahoy. It's just that added sweetener in there. So this is between total sweeteners, Detrix, HFCS, glucose, and then cane and sugar beet sugar. So again, you can kind of see the differences there. I think we'll always have total sweeteners. We'll always have a lot more than that just because it's cheaper to put in that food product. Now, meats, my favorite probably to talk about consumption-wise, because who doesn't love a good steak? So we now eat about 200 pounds per capita every year of meat, which some cases could be good, some cases could be bad, depending on your, what you like to eat. So obviously that meat contains, that high level of protein, and probably the easiest form of protein that we can get. I mean, we can get protein from plants, and a lot of people do. A lot of people will, go vegan or go vegetarian, and they'll get that protein that they need from plants, but they have to eat a lot more or take some sort of multivitamin to make sure that they get that protein. So the big thing that we look at with protein, obviously beef, we look at pork, eggs, lamb, poultry. Those are all really good examples of meat and protein. One of the biggest things that we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years is how the consumption of poultry has increased, but the consumption of red meat like beef has decreased. Why is that? There's a lot of different tales that you can tell with that because of marketing. One might be prices. One might, that white meat versus red meat. But in some cases, it might be a medical reason, and it might be the way a person digests it. And we've started to see a little bit of an incline in people that are actually allergic to different types of meat. So kind of crazy when you think about all of that and how it really affects your body. 70, shellfish and fish will probably always be at the bottom just because, in the Midwestern part of the United States, we don't have fresh fish and we don't have fresh shellfish. So it's something that we don't partake in a lot. Red meat and poultry are there in the middle there. And then total meat. So everything kind of combined there. Yeah, I think we'll see a little bit more of a shift with both poultry and red meat to increase in our generation by 2050, but I could be wrong. So we'll see. All right, so now let's look at vegetables and fruit. So that has hugely increased in the past decade or so. So about half of the vegetables and fruits that we eat are actually in a processed form. So whether that is a canned way, it's canned in that kind of syrupy high fructose corn syrup, or whether that's put in different things like yogurt. I mean, it's got to be some sort of processed. We don't buy a lot of fresh fruit anymore because, well, let's face it, it goes bad easy. It's processed, so it's not going to last long. So that's kind of something that we've struggled with vegetables and fruit, and it's canned or it's preserved with a lot more sodium to make sure that it's going to last. You can buy a can of beans and it'll last until next year, and you'd be able to eat it next year. So it's actually sitting in that in your cabinet for a whole year, as opposed to buying fresh beans and you have to eat them within a couple weeks or freeze them. One of the big things that we consume the most, though, fruit-wise, is melons. We eat a lot of bananas, a lot of citrus and apples. Vegetables that we consume the most, potatoes. I think that'll always be a thing. We'll always eat potatoes more than we eat a lot of other different vegetables. Tomatoes, lettuce, and corn. Choose what we're going to eat. Well, there's two main factors that we look at, and the first one is the availability of the food. So if you were to go into the CAF right now, you are very fortunate, no matter what some people might say, you're very fortunate because you have choices. You have a variety of different items that you can get. You can eat pizza every day. You can eat the salad bar every day. You can eat the classic every day. You can eat whatever you want every single day. you have availability. Okay, we import food so that you can have availability, and the United States grows an abundance of different foods so that you can have availability. And if I want an avocado in January, I could do it because we import that food. The other thing that we look at when we're looking at what we eat is food costs. So how much it costs to eat. Okay, like I said before, you can go to McDonald's and get a meal for pretty much $3, I think, on the dollar menu. That is easy for us to do because we spend less on food. Americans do. Government, they also do provide subsidies for that as well. But there's also some hidden costs in food. So that double cheeseburger that you ate, not that whole dollar is going back to that farmer and rancher who grew the beef, who grew the wheat to make the bread, who grew the tomatoes, the lettuce, the onion, the pickle, all of that, or the cucumber, I guess. So there's definitely some hidden costs within those food. And then the salt that it takes to preserve all of that stuff combined together. Food would be. Okay, so I want you to look at this real closely. I want you to look at this, okay? The United States, percent of income spent on food, 10.9%. So of our income, let's say you make $10,000 a year, you're gonna spend about $1,000, maybe a little bit more, on food, okay? Look at India, 51.4% of their total income is spent on food. Over half of their income is spent on making sure that they have enough food. They don't have no dollar menus in India. Look at Germany, 17.7, France, 15.5, Australia, 14.6. So the United States is actually, we spend the less amount on food, and it's the less percent of our income.